Let's move into Billy Napier. He was finally officially fired, let go of his head coaching duties at Florida. What are we thinking about that? He didn't save his job. He wasn't able to create a big enough turnaround. As far as the program is concerned for Florida, right move. Where do we see him going after this?
I think this is an interesting move from the program, especially firing a head coach after a win. I understand that win wasn't even relatively pretty, and they had to eke it out against Mississippi State. But I think that Mississippi State isn't even that bad of a football team. And if you're going to do this, I don't know that this was the exact right moment. Is there ever a right moment to fire your head coach? But yeah, in the middle of the season, I feel like this just guarantees that like you lose a lot of people because like doesn't the 30-day transfer window open after a head coach is fired? And then also DJ Lagway, I don't see a world in which he is not in that transfer portal. Maybe not this season, but going into the end of the fall when the transfer portal period ends, I think that they probably lose him, and this team just goes into a full rebuild. Which is kind of the case where they were kind of trying to do an informal rebuild where they do it with their head coach, but they just lose him at the end of the season. I liked what he did at the end of last season, but it just felt like this season wasn't going really anywhere. And they have some competitive games. They have a win against Texas, but I don't know. I think that this is probably the right decision. Just interesting timing because we've kind of been calling for it for a little bit here, and I don't disagree with the actual concept of Billy Napier getting fired. Just I don't know that I was fully expecting it after this week, but a lot of people were, because there were a lot of people that were calling for it before the game. There were a lot of people calling for it during the game. The Florida fans were chanting "Fire Billy" even when they were down in that Mississippi State game. So I think that it's the right decision. Just interesting timing is my whole take on the situation.
I think that they needed some time, which sounds ridiculous because he feels like he's been on the hot seat for like 2 years now. But I think that they needed some time after the Texas A&M loss to make sure that they had all of their ducks in a row and they weren't going to fire him, in the middle of the week before Mississippi State. So I think that they had an idea that they were going to fire him regardless. And obviously it wasn't a pretty win. So at the very least, they could get away with it. And nobody's going to remember that you fired him after a win anyway in the long run. The 30-day transfer portal thing is really interesting because they changed that rule mid-season. So the 30-day transfer window doesn't start till Florida hires a new head coach. There were some teams that were grandfathered in to the old rule like UCLA, but actually I did read something about that, and none of the UCLA players hopped in the portal. And I think that's a really good sign to what they're doing with that program because that has been an insane turnaround. But so at the very least, Florida doesn't have that. And DJ Lagway, he might stay a Gator. We'll see who they end up going to. They're going to be competing with Penn State for probably the top dog in college football, or the top coach that wants to leave and go somewhere. So they'll shell out a ton of money. I'm sure Florida fans root against Ole Miss and Nebraska, root for those teams to fall apart. So then maybe it's more likely that their individual coaches, Matt Rule and Lane Kiffin, end up going to a different school. I think that that's probably their best case scenario for sure by a mile. And, not bad. I don't disagree with the move whatsoever. I think it was time. It was the right deal. And Mike Norvell is definitely next.
I can understand the Lane Kiffin perspective of this, but I don't know that Matt Rule is a significantly better coach than Billy Napier. Like I mean he definitely could be, but that Nebraska program it's in a good spot, and I think that Dylan Raiola is decent, even though that they're coming off a loss. I don't know that Matt Rule is like miles above, especially when it comes to recruiting. It felt like Billy Napier had like at least a decent handle on that. They had some pretty good recruits, namely DJ Lagway. Verno, like Brown is their best receiver right now, the current true freshman. So I don't know. I feel like there's also look into what you can get. And I don't know that landscape is particularly bright, right? Lane Kiffin is definitely that name that if he was going to make a jump, Florida, even in the SEC, is I feel like another step above Ole Miss if he's going to continue going in the upwards trajectory. But I think that it's always good to keep the perspective of who you can get. And I just don't know, especially with the perspective of when we were talking about Penn State, we kind of mentioned that, is it like if what was out there was Manny Diaz, was like that really going to be a good hire for them relative to the fact that they're losing James Franklin? I think that Florida's in a pretty similar situation where I guess you need somebody to just do a full reset on the program and kind of come in and set a new culture. But are any of these coaches significantly better than Billy Napier? I'm struggling to pinpoint one that I'm really looking at, especially with Kurt Signetti getting that new contract extension and a lot of the other coaches kind of just looking like they're going to stay put where they are. I don't see that name right now that really sticks out as significantly better. But it was also just time for that program for a while. They've been chanting Fire Billy for like 2 years now. So I understand.
Yeah, I don't. And Marcus Freeman's a name that I've seen thrown around. I don't think he's leaving for either of those jobs. Notre Dame is a great job to have. It just so happened that Brian Kelly kind of, he didn't like wear out his welcome or anything, but he chose to leave and he wanted to go to LSU. It is what it is. You see how that turned out for him. I don't think Marcus Freeman's making that decision anytime soon. And with the way that program has kind of changed culturally under him, I don't see it. Maybe Golish from USF. It just depends on what you want. It's been so long almost, it feels like now for Matt Rule, pre-Nebraska and Panthers era. Some not you, but some people maybe forget, how down in the dumps Temple was, and he brought them back in the mid 2010s. And then Baylor had their whole scandal and everything that happened. He took over and they ended up getting, I believe, like 11 wins in one of the years. Like he's a really good guy who could turn around the program. And then maybe we just haven't seen him at like the absolute highest level in college football. Like, is he going to be in a position where he ends up like James Franklin, where he turns the program around but can't win the big game? I don't know. Just simply throwing that out there because I guess we haven't really seen him at a program with that many resources. I know Nebraska's got plenty, but I feel like they've been down for so long. I would probably give the edge to other schools like Florida and Penn State. It's weird because I had no idea that Matt Rule played at Penn State, so I feel like Penn State would be the more logical decision among those. And that's where Florida, I think, gets caught a little bit because it's like if you go out here, big game hunting, Penn State could get that guy and you could end up being left with whatever else is out there. And I think that you still could have a lot. But yeah, Signetti, it was the no-brainer decision. I mean, you were obviously going to give him a pay raise, but Signetti would have been a guy you throw however much money that you possibly can at and try to get him. And that's just the way that it is. Lane Kiffin, I really honestly do see him staying at Ole Miss if they have a great year. But if it falls apart towards the end of the year, I think anything's open with Lane Kiffin.
Yeah, I think that Alex Golish is a really interesting name to throw out there just because he could be in the mix for that job. But I think that just in the state of Florida football, USF is kind of looked at as like in the second tier with like UCF, maybe like to a lesser extent FAU, and like the teams either in the group of five or newly into the conference like the Big 12 and UCF. I don't know. I just feel like that'd be it just feels like that would be a step down. I understand that USF is having a good season. Alex Golish is leading the charge on that, former offense coordinator at Tennessee and before that UCF too. So like he has experience in the college football level, but I don't know. It's just like from the factor of like being in Florida and understanding like how big of a job Florida is, like the University of Florida is, and being in the SEC, like just going from a group of five school in USF and making that big of a jump to UF, it feels like a little bit drastic for that name to be floated around there, and it just feels like that just be a step down for the program that is Florida, having to resort to USF's head coach. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I can see that perspective. I just think I looked at it the other way though, more in like the half glass full kind of perspective, where I'm like, oh well, he's got Florida recruits, he's got the pulse on the state a little bit there. And USF, I was thinking about this the other day. I was like, dude, when USF is good, it almost feels like there's more national attention than when UCF is good. Like I maybe I'm forgetting, I know UCF got a ton of national attention in 2017, 2018, but when USF is good, I feel like a lot of people, like older college football fans, recognize that Bulls brand a little bit more because of what they were able to do in the mid 2000s. And they've been around a little bit longer than UCF, but now obviously UCF's in Big 12. So it's like a little bit less of a point. But I feel like the culture and what they have at USF is like more nationally appealing. So I don't think that they would go that way or see it as a step down. But like I said, they're going for those other names first. I think that they want to go almost as safe as possible. I don't know if James Franklin, I can't believe we went this long talking about the Florida opening. I'm just throwing it out there.
Yeah.
If there's a guy that you want to try to stabilize the program, he did it for Vandy and he did it for Penn State. I know Bill O'Brien was like the main guy there at, the post-Paterno era, but like, he did it at Penn State as well, and he's never been bad anywhere that he's went. Maybe that's where you want to go, because right now you're not winning the big games. You're so far away, you're not winning the little games. So get James Franklin in there to win you those those gimmies, and then maybe you go from there. Or and, also too, who's to say he's just gonna like also wherever he goes never be able to win the big game for the rest of his life? I don't know. I feel like that's like a little bit overstated with the next place that he goes to, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think the only issue with James Franklin, right, is you get a Billy Napier who at least beats at least beats Texas this year, which could be considered a pretty big game, especially at Florida for just for the program in general. I I just feel like the stigma around James Franklin is if he was the Florida head coach at the time that they played Texas, I don't know that they win that game. And just just going from like storylines and perspectives, I think that Billy Napier maybe it just in the look of a lot of people's eyes, probably gives you a better chance than James Franklin to win any of those really big SEC matchups. And it feels like with the brand that Florida is, all of those games are going to be big matchups. Like it's not like, and it's every game in the SEC feels like a big matchup, but like the games that they're playing this year, LSU, Texas, Miami, Texas A&M, all of those, like I don't know how many wins you're chalking up to James Franklin's coaching. So I think that's maybe why we don't like throw that name around, because every game in the SEC is essentially a big game, and we know James Franklin's track record with big games.